Hello, my name is Jason Reichl, and you're listening to Risk Management Brick by Brick. Every episode, I sit down to talk risk, how to avoid it, how to manage it, and how it impacts our built world. This season, we'll be diving deep into the world of AI and talking its transformative influence on risk management. Over the next 8 episodes, I'll be interviewing a series of experts in the field who will be offering unique insights and perspectives on how AI is revolutionizing the way we approach and mitigate risk. Let's get to it. Welcome to another episode of Brick by Brick. I'm Jason. Why don't we give a little introduction, make sure we get all that out of the way.
Sure. Great to be here. Rohan Sen, principal in our data risk and privacy practice at PwC. My background is in computer science and data analytics, and I've worked my entire career at the intersection of technology and a variety of risk topics. So thanks for having me, Jason.
Yeah, amazing, man. I was so excited to get you on here. I've seen material from you and in your organization for a long time about this topic. It's definitely informed the way that I think about AI and risk. Let's start a little bit about you, though, and kind of ground the audience in your background, computer science. You know, not every computer scientist says, I want to navigate my way into a consulting company and into a risk sector. So how did you end up there?
I really liked the technical training that computer science sort of gives you, right? But having completed my computer science education, I felt that I wanted to apply it sort of in the real world in a corporate setting where I could have a ton of impact. And so I obviously knew about PwC, but I found myself into this role where we were doing a variety of risk analytics, where we were really using data-driven approaches and technology to solve risk problems, right? So I started out doing things like doing data analytics in support of litigation, but then that evolved to, things like regulatory compliance, large sort of tech-enabled sort of driving tech transformation and managing the risk associated with those transformations. And then, it's been over 10 years now, we started using machine learning to deliver some of the solutions. And so when this latest Gen AI moment happened, I was able to bring a lot of that together and start talking about responsible AI and AI risk management more broadly.
I want to jump into that, but you were just talking about something that's interesting to me around a lot of companies or a lot of people don't realize that the foundation of AI started way back with machine learning in the last 10 years. But we collected all this data and now the generative AI can do something about it in front of us. So now people are, seeing the two pieces of this come together and make this world that we're in now and the need for responsible AI. So why don't we define what responsible AI is for the listeners?
Look, at the highest level, responsible AI is a series of practices that help enable innovation with AI while adequately managing its risk. That's at the heart of it. And the key piece of that is adequately managing the risk. And then the flip side also is the innovation. We don't see responsible AI necessarily as being this big stage gate or like slowing down things or asking a whole bunch of questions. It's how do we make it easy for people to innovate with AI? Right? But then put the right level of risk management in place so that it's not a free-for-all, but it is helping that innovation journey. As every company out there is trying to figure out what to do with AI, a lot of companies are doing a lot already with AI. Responsible AI is saying, hey, yes, absolutely, we should innovate, but let's also take care of the risk side as well.
I mean, it's essentially bringing AI into the risk management. Everyone knows that without risk, there would be no business progress, right? And so your take on this is AI is inevitable. It's going to revolutionize the way that businesses work and we approach problems. But we need to do it with a guise of responsibility. Obviously, that's in the title. But what I really like about the framework and what I really like about the way of thinking about it is it's understanding that all this innovation poses risk to your organization and trying to get the risk manager to wrap their arms around it. Now, when I talk to risk managers, and I'll admit that I talk to risk managers more in legacy industries, maybe not where you're talking to risk managers, how ready are they to wrap their arms around this new responsibility of managing AI with risk as a forefront thought?
The answer really does vary across industry sectors and frankly also based on the size of company, right? So if you have, a large bank that's been doing model risk management for many, many years now, right? Or frankly, health insurance or health payer, they're likely to be more mature and have their arms around it a lot more than, say, a utility that's maybe just embracing AI, right? So the answer does tend to vary. The other challenging part is that AI has really made risk sort of a multidimensional problem because of how many aspects of an organization it touches and the complexity of the technology. So you now have to bring in data risk. You need to bring in privacy risk. You need to bring in cyber risk. And initially, we saw a little bit of, somebody at the company got pointed to and said, well, you're the AI risk person. And in a lot of cases, it was the chief privacy officer. But what we are saying is, look, AI risk needs to be handled holistically. And so you really need to convene a group of risk managers with the individual domain expertise and then put one person in charge of making it all work together. But to go back to your question, it is a spectrum. Some companies are readier than others, but I think we're also all learning together. And it doesn't help that the technology keeps changing every month.
The failure in the AI policy that I've seen most organizations do, and I know that you see the same thing, is in not setting this up as sort of a governance or something that's multidimensional, as you pointed out. So yeah, I completely understand. I see that all the time. We have customers now who are coming and just in their contracts are asking for no AI, right? Is that a smart move right now for organizations to not work with AI right now and stand on the peripheral? Or is it more important to accept these risks and manage these risks than just avoid them altogether? Or do you view the avoidance conversation as that's not even feasible?
My perspective is that saying no to AI is sort of burying your head in the sand a little bit, right? Just given how inevitable the march of this technology is. Equally, it's absolutely fair to ask some of the right questions to get comfortable around the use of AI. This is the path that we're trying to sort of lay with responsible AI to say, listen, people typically say no AI because it's an easy answer. There's a lot of fear, perhaps, right? There might be questions that they've not asked and therefore not gotten an answer to. And so, really, our perspective is let's ask the questions, let's understand the risk, let's define our risk appetite. And if it's within our appetite, let's go, let's innovate with AI, let's do it fast, let's get all the benefits. If it's outside of the box, that might need a few extra conversations. In certain cases, we may say no, that's okay. But let's not just say no off the bat, right? That feels a little counterintuitive, just given how prevalent this technology is going to be.
I was talking to someone on a cast recently where they work with large health chains, health systems, and they brought in a new ultrasound machine, something they had done many times before. They actually had that model, many models of that. They just bought a new one. They didn't have their third-party vendor go back through any kind of assessments or anything like that. They put it in. They didn't realize that it was connected and that the software vendor had updated it with AI capabilities without their entire organization knowing, because we know as software is like innovate now, ask questions later about it. And now they had a piece of software that had AI built into it, which was taking personal data and summarizing it and sending it to God knows where. So let's talk about the risks that third parties create in this world that you guys are looking at.
Yeah, so there's a few different flavors of it, and the example you gave is certainly one of them. But the other piece I would say is that because there's so much AI technology, and the vast majority of companies are buying these technologies off the shelf, whether it be a large language model or embedded within a SaaS solution or indeed embedded within a product, like you just said. And so it does, in fact, put a little bit more onus on third-party risk management, where you might have to be more frequently asking and reevaluating your third-party vendors. B, having the right questions when you do reevaluate. And then lastly, this is not done in a day, but updating your contracts where there may be notification clauses, right, if they do something with AI. But all of that, in my mind, is wrapped around this concept of it doesn't matter whether you develop the AI yourself or you got the AI through a third-party source. It needs to be subject to the same standards of risk management, regardless of the source. And so the same scrutiny you put your sort of first-party solutions through, you should put your third-party solutions through as well. Now, of course, there's going to be situations where for IP reasons, you may not be able to get into the guts of a model, et cetera. You can have some compensating mechanisms like contractual mechanisms to account for that. But you should really hold third party and first party to the same standard from a risk management perspective.
Right. So it's the classic triangle of risk management, which is contract, transfer, or accept, if that's the last thing you can do. But you need to log all of these acceptance. I haven't seen a lot of AI risk be put onto risk logs. Like when I'm talking to risk managers, it's just kind of a separate IT risk being managed a lot of times outside of the risk management or manager themselves. Maybe they have some oversight, but they're not actually monitoring it like they do other things. And so I'm seeing more and more risk managers come to me and say, hey, 10 years ago, our job was a lot different. Now we have all of this complexity, and the role is really developing into a hybrid of a technical process driven role. And not to say that it wasn't that before, but a lot of the technical piece was from the industry that the risk manager was in. So a construction risk manager would have a lot of technical expertise around construction risk. And now we're talking about actually moving them into a technologist space in a way. I wonder if you have predictions that we're going to see more interest from more technical risk managers being part of that risk management organization, where traditionally now risk managers are coming up from within the industry and getting promoted to safety or moving to risk in some form that way.
I think it's going to be very important for that hybrid person. And look, you could come up to the tech organization or you could come up to the risk organization. But ultimately, I think the people who are going to be successful are ones that know both worlds. So you could potentially have an individual that came up to the tech organization, really understands the tech. But if you sort of take a maybe 70-30 or an 80-20 split, right, they need to know that 20 or 30% of sort of the risk and process world, because they need to be able to translate back and forth, right? And the same for the person that came up to the risk organization, where they need to understand the tech at least at a surface level, at least from a risk perspective, because without that, I see a lot of talking past each other potentially, and in that talking past each other, potentially some risk being left on the table that folks may not want to leave on the table.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is very interesting to see how organizations are responding to needing to be dynamic and resilient in this way. The old adage of your IT team telling you no for everything, and the old adage of your risk manager telling you, don't do that, stop doing that, that's risky. We know that those are not the way, especially in a competitive market where businesses are struggling to continue to grow the way they want to, that they just can't do that. And so I've really seen a different mindset come across these organizations of isolation not being the answer to continue their success.
And said another way, the risk function being an enabler rather than a roadblock.
Let's take this one step further. So, what does responsible generative AI look like in different functions? Say, like HR versus product development. Obviously, in certain areas, the responsibility has to change in the way that you have to look at that.
So, what I would say is you have to start from a place of uniformity. And usually, the way we sort of talk about that is you need to have a uniform risk taxonomy across the organization so that you are understanding the various dimensions of risk, regardless of the specific unit where the solution is being built, so that you have a common understanding and a scoring methodology, right? That's step one. Now, you might within a particular unit weigh some of those risks higher than others, right? So, for example, HR, that's obviously a lot of personal information. You will be a lot more sensitive to privacy risk. Let's say you are in an FP&A kind of function, you're going to scrutinize model risk much more because the impact of that could be potentially catastrophic from a business and profitability standpoint, right? So, if you start from that common language, it is about weighing the risk dimensions in the right way for that particular function. That's a key piece of responsible AI, and agreeing what those weights and dimensions should be. That's sort of the foundation of it. And then the last piece I'll talk about is the roles and responsibilities. And again, there might be some differences across the organization and the various functions, but ultimately, each function needs to be very clear on who is responsible for each of these dimensions of risks, and importantly, the mitigating controls and processes that help buy down these risks for those more risky AI use cases. So those three pieces, happy to dive deeper, but to me, that's sort of the foundation for responsible AI, wrapped, of course, in the right processes, the right governance, the right policies and procedures.
So let's say that you do those three things and you apply a taxonomy. You have then another paradigm on that is the department or function that's using it. So scores can be different. So you get baseline scores and then increased risk in those areas. Understand that. How are your customers managing that today? What are they using to manage that? How are they managing it? Is it all in spreadsheets? Does the mechanism of fidelity matter at this point, or does it just matter that you're doing it?
So I would say a lot of clients we're seeing are on a maturity journey. And so, yes, some of them may actually be in spreadsheets today. But let me perhaps say a little bit about what good looks like. So number one, digitize this, put it in a tool that's centralized instead of 20 spreadsheets on 30 people's laptops, step one. Number two is create an inventory. If you don't know what your AI footprint is, there's not a whole lot you're going to be able to do to manage the risk around it, and especially some of the regulatory risk aspects of it. So that's number two. So digitize it, put it in a platform, put workflow around it so that you can have all of the right roles and responsibilities, the sign off, the documentation, et cetera. And then have that, your AI footprint documented. And that to me is sort of the foundation of responsible AI, that you actually know and have awareness of what AI is, whether it comes, again, as I said, first party, third party, whether it's a Gen AI model, whether it's a traditional machine learning model, gather all of that up. Now, there are other components of that, of course. How do those things get built? What are your development practices? So, in addition to the inventory, how are you infusing responsible AI into the development practices where, as things are being ideated, conceptualized, built, so on and so forth, that we are choosing the right use cases to build? We have adequate scrutiny about what data is going into those use cases. What are the regulatory impacts? All of that needs to be built in during the conceptualization and the build of the tool. And the last thing I'll say is, especially with some of the more newer AI technologies, there's only so much testing you can do because they're inherently non-deterministic, which means that they will not produce the same result consistently over time. And so the ongoing testing and monitoring of the solutions to make sure that they're still working as intended is especially, this is not a place where you can build it and let it go. And then, every year, you do a little bit of a model drift test and see if it's all good. We're past that now, where we need to get into more continuous monitoring.
Are there tools that you recommend for that? Or how do you monitor AI results continuously? Because that's something that a lot of companies can't even fathom how they're going to control that.
It is a very emergent area at the moment. And I think in terms of tools and technologies, I think that'll evolve. Today, a lot of what I'm seeing is using existing monitoring tools like logging systems, et cetera, to like monitor AI.
So basically, right, tests to resolve this and then see if the tests remain the same.
Exactly. But the direction of travel I see is that those tools themselves will evolve to start doing more sort of AI specific testing. So, as an example, a security logging tool will give you a whole bunch of information in a log, but is it actually capturing the prompt into an LLM, logging the result, and maybe doing some analysis on was that result accurate for some definition of accurate? That's where I see the direction of travel being. I think we have maybe a few months before we get to that stage.
Great. A few months is a whole new world. So I'll ask you, what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years around AI?
Oh gosh, 3 to 5 feels like a lifetime.
Let's narrow the context. What do you think the next 6 months looks like?
6 months to a year. Look, I think agentic systems are obviously a very hot topic. It adds a whole new layer to the risk management conversation. You have generative AI that was doing individual tasks or responses to prompts. Now you have systems that can take the output of those or the results and think about, what the logical next step would be. So we just put out a piece, and, we can certainly post the podcast here on how you start thinking about risk for agentic systems. And I think that's going to be the next big frontier for us as risk professionals to think about when you have the layer on top of the layer where there's just a lot of variability in what a system can do. How do you manage the risk of that? So that's going to be the big topic.
Yeah, the audience would love anything on this. This is the question I'm being asked all the time. The next question is kind of similar. A lot of risk managers go, okay, so we put all these things in place. Let's get real. ChatGPT is living on people's phones, their personal phones. They're walking around. They're doing things. They're stuck. They're taking information out from our systems and putting it in this. How do we even wrap around the fact that this is a business tool that's out there, AI, and it's also being sold to us as a personal productivity tool outside of that? I think very much of the emergence of handsets and everyone having 2 cell phones in their pockets, and eventually companies being like, this is not the right thing. We're going to allow them some access to put what they need to on their phones. So how are you suggesting from a responsibility standpoint with your actual employees and their use? Does this have to be a full enablement program where you're educating your entire user base on personal productivity of AI on top of the business context?
I can tell you that our perspective is that we have years, decades of experience balancing exactly what you said, right? the personal phone versus not, the personal email versus corporate email, our personal OneDrive versus a corporate OneDrive, as an example. And the same principle really applies, right? There are two different environments. If you're doing something for work, you need to use your work instance for it. And I would hope that most companies are providing those tools to their employees. We have very clear guidelines. If you're doing something with client data, you cannot put it in any public or personal instance. Just like you cannot email corporate stuff to your personal email, same way you cannot put it in your personal AI solution. And that's really sort of the principle, right? So there's an element of policy and education associated with that. There's an element of monitoring. Data loss prevention is a fairly mature sort of discipline, which now does need to evolve a little bit for AI. But striking that balance, educating and saying, look, you should not be putting this stuff, in a public instance, and then having some detective controls to sort of prevent that. Will it be perfect? Not just yet. We might, in fact, end up, and a lot of clients may end up over blocking. And that's okay. We'll learn and we'll evolve and we'll get that right over time.
What's interesting to me is that you're using other shifts in technology and those things and systems and just expanding them to this new use case. Do you believe this is innovation as normal, or do you believe as a technologist this is something completely new and different, and the world is going to be different, and the way that we go to work is going to be different?
I'm going to give a little bit of a boring answer in that it's somewhat in the middle. There are aspects of it where you have to step back and sort of think pragmatically. This is an evolution of technology. We've had many of them before. And can we dig out some of those playbooks and have them be relevant here? And in a number of cases, I find that the answer is yes. But we should not ignore the fact that AI touches a lot of things. I think as a single technology, the breadth of an organization it can touch is a lot. And so you have to be humble and say, look, there are certain aspects of this technology that may need brand new, unique solutions to the care and feeding of this. As an example, we used to talk about testing machine learning models. You can't really test an LLM, at least as of today, though I keep hearing about, some progress being made there. So that is a risk that you may need to care for in a unique manner. That's okay. But if there's precedent, let's not sort of throw up our hands and say the whole thing's brand new, and so we need to redesign stuff from scratch. A lot of stuff might still be relevant.
Let's go to a game of Risky or Too Risky. Let's get to know you a little bit better. How about that?
Okay.
So let's see if this holds any water with you. Attending a large festival without any meetup plans or local contacts. So imagine going to a conference or a festival and you don't know anyone there. Is that risky or too risky for you?
Risky.
Risky, okay. Are you a festival person? Or, I'm sure you go to lots of conferences, but do you ever go to like a big thing like that on your own?
I can't remember a time I've gone on my own. I've probably gone with at least one other person, but I'm going to have a good time.
I think I was I used to work in Copenhagen. I think I went to a big music festival in Copenhagen because it was just like a weekend and I was there by myself. A very different experience going to those kind of things by yourself. Let's go to some of these business ones I have up here. Well, we know the answer to this. Using personal email account for official business communication, risky or too risky?
Too risky. All day.
How about putting everybody you know on Signal and putting out corporate plans? Do you think that's too risky?
Too risky.
Eliminating redundancy in supply chain management to cut cost. So taking out redundancies, too risky, or, everyone's talking about cutting costs. So
I would say risky.
Do you ride motorcycles ever? Do you ever motorcycle around?
I do not. I'm a car guy. If I turn my computer, you'd see a lot of cars, but I'm a car guy.
Okay. What type of car is your favorite car?
Aspirationally, I would love to have a Ferrari.
Driving a Ferrari fast for the first time, risky or too risky?
Risky.
I once drove one of those Cobras and I really punched it, right? And as soon as I punched it, it started drifting. And I was like, I'm not sure about this car. I'm not sure if I can handle this. Thank you so much for joining me on Brick by Brick. This is a really fascinating conversation. One last question. We have a lot of people from in the field listening to this. And I want to ask this. If you could leave risk leaders with one essential mindset or practical step for embracing AI responsibility this year, what would it be?
Foster innovation. There's a lot of very cool opportunities that AI affords us, right, that we could only dream about a couple of years ago. As risk people, foster that innovation, manage your risk, and that's going to get us to a great spot.
Well, when you do get that Ferrari, come by and pick me up. I'll talk to you soon, my friend. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
Risk Management Brick by Brick is brought to you by TrustLayer. Find out how TrustLayer manages risk so that the people can build the physical world around us, head over to trustlayer.io. And then make sure to subscribe to Risk Management Brick by Brick on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. On behalf of the TrustLayer team, thank you for listening.